History is made and championships are won with people. And in college football, that translates into recruiting. Grit, gizzard, courage, talent. Probably the assets of the whole team in that order. Men who came to play football at Alabama because they wanted to be building blocks for a foundation that would reach across decades and generations.
One of our first occasions to visit with Coach Bryant was a room full of freshmen, and he came in and started talking about the little things, and I think that makes a difference in a winning or championship football team. Doing the little bitty things. You got to do the little bitty things to get to the bigger things. And he guaranteed us, and that's the words he used. He said, I guarantee you in 4 years, if you go out there and do these little things I'm asking you to do, if you put out 90%, come out there and put out 110% the next day, make up the difference. Always accomplishing that one little thing. Somehow or other, in everything that you do, walk around campus, you got to create an atmosphere, an air about Alabama football. If you do these little things, I guarantee you, in 4 years, when you're seniors, you'll be national champion.
In the fourth season, 1961, the pieces were in place for Bears boys to begin a championship march that would carry through 2 decades.
The 1961 team was had a great group of guys, you know, had tremendous work ethics. We were smaller than most teams, but we worked on quickness and endurance, and I think the real thing was hard work. We always believed that if we stayed close to the team, we could beat them in the third and fourth quarter because we'd be better conditioned and just work harder than the opposing team.
The biggest thing is it takes 11 guys thinking and doing the same thing. Now, if you don't think they're going to score, he says ain't no way in hell they're going to score on you.
Only one team scored as much as 7 points that season, North Carolina State with Roman Gabriel. 11 teams could only score a total of 25 points. Only 2 games could be called close, 9-0 over Tulane and 10-3 in beating Arkansas in the Sugar Bowl. And the Sugar Bowl was the punctuation of the national championship. The late Pat Trammell was the leader of that 61 team, and his mates all make that point. He could get pretty salty in the huddle sometimes.
Pat Trammell was a great leader. He had that fire and enthusiasm, take charge kind of guy, which you love in a quarterback. He was hard-nosed, more like a linebacker than there was a quarterback as far as his attitude toward football, but
you really knew where he stood all the time. He was very demanding of his teammates. And everything all said and done, Pat Trammell was a complete winner.
One other factor that came and went with that early group that would influence the future, they all believed. They all succeeded, and then they went forth as the best salesman you ever heard.
When Coach Bryant came here, he established his brand of football, his way of thinking, his approach to the game, to the defensive part, the kicking game, and being a team with a lot of pride and played with a lot of class. And it took 3 or 4 years to, say 3 years, to kind of establish that way of thinking. I think this is one thing that has carried on through the following years.
1961 was a special team, I think, and had great significance, I believe, because I think it reestablished Alabama as a national power and a team that had to be considered every year.
And others of quality came, like the lanky lad from western Pennsylvania, Joe Willie Namath. By 1964, the guns were sufficiently loaded again. Was on again, despite the fact Namath would go down with a knee injury in the 4th win of the season over NC State. This starting a siege of pain from his knees that would be with him the rest of his life.
I think what it said when Joe Namath went out, that it was up to the rest of the team to reach a little deeper. And I think that's exactly what happened. I think as a team, we probably came together more as a team, and people accepted a little greater responsibility, seeing success follow.
Steve Sloan stepped in at quarterback for wins over Florida, Tennessee, Mississippi State, and LSU. Namath was back for Georgia Tech and Auburn, and the Tigers were a load. In that game, Ray Ogden, 108-yard kickoff return as Bama won 21-14. Notre Dame then lost to Southern California, and the Crimson Tide was #1 in the polls and national champions for a 7th time. Second time in the 60s. Bowl game results did not count in the national polls then, and that was fortunate because the Tide lost to Texas 21-17 in the Orange Bowl. A thundering battle, and the outcome is still disputed. Now, on January 2nd, with that Orange Bowl decision still stuck in his craw, Joe Namath agreed to the richest rookie contract in the history of professional football. And of course, you know, Joe went on to become a rather historic figure in pro football. Now, to be a national champion in anything, you got to be pretty good. But you also have to be lucky. And 1965 was a very good lesson of that for Alabama football. The opening game was between the hedges against the Georgia Bulldogs. With Alabama leading 17-10, Georgia quarterback Kirby Moore passed to Pat Hudson. Seemed down on his knees, but he lateraled to Bob Taylor, who raced 73 yards for a touchdown. Oh, you should have heard the words. But Moore then passed to Hudson for a 2-point conversion, and Georgia had the win 18-17. Then there was the 7-7 tie with Tennessee. The Tide ran all over Legion Field, but could score only 7 points. That's the game in which sophomore substitute quarterback Kenny Stabler threw the ball out of bounds trying to stop the clock, not realizing it was 4th down. That was the night that Coach Bryant kicked the locker room door off its hinges.
And we came in as a padlock on the door. Coach Bryant told Chief Smelly, said, "Get your damn gun out and shoot it off." And he wouldn't do it. And Coach Bryant kicked the door. And it came off his hinges, and it went back and hit and came back, and he forearmed it. Walked in, said, "Everybody sit down."
Now let's ponder this luck thing for a minute. There had been so much squawking in the wake of the 1964 polls when Alabama had been voted #1 before they lost to Texas in the Orange Bowl that the poll people said, all right, we'll include the bowl results in our final poll starting with the 1965 season. And that was Alabama's first stroke of luck. Now here's the rest of it. At the end of the season, #1 Michigan State's in the Rose Bowl. They lose by 2 points to UCLA. #2 Arkansas loses in a close game to LSU in the Cotton Bowl. #3 Nebraska now, with all the other games complete, is playing #4 Alabama in the Orange Bowl. With 2 of the 3 unbeaten untied teams already down, the nation's football eyes focus on Miami. Alabama was a team of darters, outweighed dramatically by the beefy Cornhuskers that Bob Devaney had brought from the Big 8 Conference. It was a decisive 39-28 win for Alabama and good for a 3rd national championship in the decade of the 60s.